Get freedom of choice for your small business with the new Amazon Business American Express card. Flexibly choose between 60-day payment terms or 1.5% Amazon rewards points on eligible Amazon UK purchases only. Make the best payment choice to suit your cash flow. Your business, your rules. Your Amazon Business American Express card. Apply now. Get a £25 Amazon gift card on approval at amazon.co.uk/Amex card application. Terms apply. Representative 32.6% APR variable. Subject to approval, aged 18 plus.
Hello and welcome to this perfectly splendid episode of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusively on the PAUK network. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, we are joined by our perfectly splendid Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello, guys.
Perfectly splendid. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's been practicing a new intro.
He has. I quite like perfectly splendid, though.
Yeah, I thought, as we're talking about Bly Manor tonight, I thought, we've got to use some of the terminology.
Why?
At UK Export Finance, we ensure that no viable UK export fails by providing government-backed finance and insurance. So if you want to expand into new markets, we can help you win contracts with attractive finance terms. If you've got an overseas order, we can help you fulfill it with a working capital loan. And if you're entering a challenging market, we can ensure that you get paid with the right insurance. We've helped hundreds of companies to win contracts, fulfill orders, and get paid.
To get the exporter's edge, search UK Export Finance.
Why not? Because
why not? Yeah.
Yeah, it is something that's definitely caught the imagination out there of thousands and thousands of people when it got released, and a load of people binge-watched it. And it brings up a lot of questions, which is why we're going to talk about it tonight, because it brings up so many questions, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the first questions is why so many people on social media just didn't get it.
Yeah, but then again, we're in the paranormal, so a lot of the concepts that it was addressing are quite kind of normal, and normal for us, do you know what I mean, in the paranormal, whereas if you're not as into the paranormal as us, there was probably a lot of subtlety there that the everyday ghost hunter watcher program person, you know,
but it was a ghost story at the end of the day.
It was the traditional ghost story, though, wasn't it? Brilliantly done, though. I thought it was great.
It was. I thought it was really well done. I just loved that whole genre anyway. And yeah, it was fantastic.
Well,
and it also follows on from Hill House as well.
Well, it is actually sort of like a standalone from Hill House, but I believe he is making like a trilogy of those sort of like the classic ghost story, which it's good to see that genre actually sort of coming back and people actually engaging with it.
So I think some of the characters were in Hill House as well.
Yeah, they're using the same actors, but they're playing different characters.
A bit like the American Horror Story thing.
Yeah. Yes, it's very much along that vein. And considering, because a lot of people were sort of wondering where actual Bly Manor is and where it was filmed and stuff. In fact, it was all filmed outside Vancouver in Canada. And the actual house itself, Bly Manor, is a CGI. The actual exterior is a blue screen or green screen.
No, it wasn't. It's alive and well and living in Essex.
Well, we'd like to think so.
It's a shame, because I have to say it was a beautiful house.
Yeah.
It is, definitely.
And the gardens.
Perfectly splendid.
Perfectly splendid indeed. Very much so. So we thought we'd do a show on some of the concepts and, that surround Bly Manor and the characters that are in it. Just to sort of maybe shed a little light or give you a little bit more thought, perhaps, in regards to some of the concepts that the programme raises. Now, well, it starts with Danny, doesn't it? The au pair.
I think before we do start, we should say that there are spoilers. There could be spoilers coming up, so warning everybody, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I think that's a definite.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I'm planning to watch it.
If you haven't seen it, Put your fingers in your ears. Still listen, but stick your fingers in your ears.
Well, yeah, we take no responsibility for spoiling your enjoyment of Bly Manor if you do go and watch it after we've talked about it.
Yeah. What she said.
Oh, dear. So, right. So we start off with the au pair. She applies for a job and gets the job. Brilliant, right?
Absolutely. In this day and age, that's a miracle in itself.
Exactly. It's a miracle that there was a job going in the first place. She gets sent to Bly Manor, which has a whole history in itself. Now, right. Danny, even before she gets to Bly Manor, is seeing an apparition in the mirror, isn't she?
Yeah, she sees the apparition of her dead ex-fiancé. But he's only an ex for like seconds before he dies.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit like guilt-ridden moment for her there, right?
Yeah, because they bring that into the story literally right at the start. You actually see you're not actually aware of who this apparition is till a fair bit into the actual story. But yeah, it is sort of it is quite a striking image, and it involves it seems to involve mirrors. It's the classic.
Yeah, it's the classic. See it in the mirror behind you, and then scary factor because she sees it in the mirror when she's at the lodging house before she goes to Bly. Now, knowing that Danny can see apparitions because she's seeing this one, do we think then that she's a latent medium? Do you think that at this point, that this is setting the scene for Danny being a latent medium?
I don't. I think it's just a case of that she's haunted, whether it's because obviously with Bly Manor there's a lot of stuff going on with memories. So I put it down to a hypothetical memory of that occasion and the crisis spirit, for want of a better term, just sort of appears to her. Because it doesn't actually do anything, it just appears. She just sees it, and it's like the last moment of that particular character that she sees.
Yeah, it's at first, you don't know who the person is and whether it's any relation to her whatsoever. And as I said earlier, that actually comes out a bit later on in the show. But when I first saw it, I thought, oh, what's going on here? Is she sort of has some sort of connection? But as the show goes on, I do sort of tend to believe that it is sort of like a guilt. It does seem to follow that classic storyline of two lovers and one suddenly departs after an argument, which is usually sort of like the classic sort of setup, and then you're sort of left with guilt after that. So I do think there is a lot of that in this.
Yeah, because it was literally his last image, as it were, because that they obviously were partners at the time. They had like a big row, or whatever, and he got out of the car after she dumped him, or vice versa, and he turned around, and then he got hit by a bus or something, and the last image you see of him is him standing there with the lights hitting his glasses.
But later on in the show, we see that she's kept the glasses, but that's a concept we'll come on to in a minute. So let's go into the concept of mirrors, because mirrors are very prevalent in the paranormal field, aren't they? In regards to the folklore and the mythology surrounding mirrors, it's a well-known tool that people have used out in the paranormal field. So what do we know about mirrors? Are they a portal to the soul? Are they a portal to another realm? What do we think of that one, lads?
Go on, Richard, I'll let you answer.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, as you said, Kerry, I mean, certainly sort of like the mirror is a fascinating one. I mean, they can actually be used as tools to actually communicating, or to sort of like bridge the gap between the here and the hereafter. I mean, one particular form is mirror scrying, which goes back a long way. So there's that concept in there, and sort of there's the whole concept of the mirror. Actually, it not only does it reflect your likeness, your reflection, it also reflects your soul as well. So I can certainly see.
The scrying thing started way before mirrors, though, didn't it? It started off with a reflective surface and old seers, and it would be like a body of water or something like that. They would use a bowl of water and stuff to scry before mirrors were invented. So it's the reflectiveness of the vessel that's important on that one, rather than it being specifically a mirror. So it has a longer history than just being mirrors, and that's sort of been carried over once mirrors got invented. But then there is this thing. I mean, even in Pride and Prejudice, there's a famous scene with Elizabeth Bennet. She's staring into a mirror and she sees Mr. Darcy, then walks in behind her and gives her the infamous letter. But she's scrying up to that point, and then there's that blur, isn't there, between reality and reflection of self, isn't it? You know, are you seeing your deepest, darkest soul when you look in the mirror?
And and your sort of example was very good, the Pride and Prejudice bit, you know, and you sort of watch many a bonnet drama on TV or read those types of novels. Mirror scrying does come into it. They will sort of, in moments of frustration, head to a mirror and like talk and take out their frustration whilst looking at their reflection in the mirror. And that scene when Elizabeth Bennet does that and that's pure scrying she's doing.
Yeah, and so this isn't a new concept. Paul, you wanted to say something?
I personally, mirrors, to me, I mean, people do say, obviously, they open up a portal to the other side. But I'm not a big believer in that anyway. I just find that hard to believe. It's just a reflection at the end of the day. What you see in the mirror is what's in the room that you're standing in. So I suppose I can understand the concept, but I don't particularly believe in it.
It's sometimes it's a very twisted perception when you look in a mirror, though, isn't it, guys? I mean, we all say, like, there's a famous thing that girls do when we go and try clothes on in the shop. They always seem to have fat mirrors. You'll put something on in a changing room, and your perception of how you thought that was going to look and how it actually looks is completely different. Is it a twisted perception then from a mirror, do you think?
Well, yeah, as I was talking to you the other night, Kerry, I mean, I always look better face on, but if I catch my reflection side on, I think, oh dear, need to lose a bit of weight here.
I do think, I mean, it depends on light and it depends on the mirror surface and how good the quality mirror is and blah, 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 doesn't it? And it is a strange one, because I think you see a reality in a mirror of your inner thoughts. If you're not feeling good about yourself, you won't see a pleasing reflection, because your mind is sort of mirroring what you see, if that makes sense. We have an ugly day. If you're not feeling good about yourself, no matter how much makeup you put on or how well you do your hair or whatever you put on, you'll find fault in that. But that's a mental perception on your reflection, right?
Yes, I can actually understand that. I can see that, yeah. You know, it's very much dependent on you to be in the right sort of frame of mind when you look into a mirror. Whatever frame of mind that does, a mirror will pick it up. It does have a knack of actually picking it up. Whether that's you sort of creating that or not is another question, yeah. But I can certainly see your point there. So
it's giving you a twisted perception of the situation or the issue. So if you're looking in the mirror particularly tormented, for example, like Danny, she's tormented by the situation of what happened with her fiance and he died, and she sees that in the mirror. And she saw that in the mirror at the funeral straight away, didn't she? She was at the funeral, she saw it in the mirror across the room from her. Do we think then that's an external internalisation of what happened, or do we think he's actually there?
Interesting one. The mirror's certainly the trigger. I mean, he only seems to manifest via the mirror. We don't sort of see him. I don't believe we actually see him away from a mirror. But
we do at the bonfire.
Oh yeah, we do, don't we? Yeah, sort of. That's sort of like towards the end, and that seems to manifest more towards the end as she is starting to come to terms with it, and whether she knows about it or not.
So going on that then, that's at the point where we find out that she's kept his glasses.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's at that point of the bonfire, she throws the glasses onto the bonfire. Do we think then that is just part of her acceptance of that part of her life, that tragedy?
Yeah.
I think
that is purely a symbolic act, and yeah, I think you can see that in that scene. You know, that is, if anything, I suppose, thinking of it now, I mean, the glasses are more, you know, because she finds one of the children with them, doesn't she? And pretty much when she takes the job, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Quite early on, I think the little girl finds them, and she sort of is wearing them in bed or something, and she's not too happy about it, you know. And that's the first time you actually see she has got a physical sort of something physical from her ex-partner. So yeah, and she does keep them pretty well tucked away. Again, they're tucked away in her suitcase. Again, I think the suitcase is symbolic of her memory. You know, it's buried. The glasses are kept at the bottom, you know, with all the clothes on top. So, but as the series progresses, slowly it starts to rise to the top to a point where she can actually confront it, deal with it, and move on.
Release it, yeah. But there's been superstition surrounding mirrors for, you know, a lot longer than what we've done this. The Romans believed that the mirrors could trap souls and cause bad luck to who owns them. So this mythology, this folklore surrounding mirrors goes back, you know, it's deep set in our psyche, isn't it, with the mirrors?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, sort of like the Romans, and as you say, it is. But you can see why, you know, it's sort of like, I should imagine by the time of Rome was when they were starting to develop mirrors, you know, sort of like real high, and they were capable of producing quite high polished and surfaces. So likenesses were becoming quite pronounced. They were not relying on sort of, you know, bowls of water and stuff like that. You know, they actually had a mirror. I mean, I think like basically they were basic sort of hand mirrors. So they were quite portable.
Yeah, I mean, it was also going back to like the ancient Greeks as well. You know, they were doing scrying with the pans of water because they were using the reflection, thinking that spirit could come to them in like the mirror universe. So you know, it's not a new concept. It's been going on for quite some time, and as you said, even the Romans, they were doing it as well. So I mean, it's not something that they were the ones that invented or anything, but the ideas are forward thinking, and yeah, it's just yeah.
Well, there is another superstition that if a loved one dies in your home, that you need to cover mirrors, which again we see Danny do when she sees the spectral image of her fiance behind her. She goes and covers the mirror. Now this goes back to Kabbalist tradition, which basically believes that when the soul leaves the body, it leaves a void, and between death and burial, you're sort of like in no man's land. So you can. You can then come into the world of the living through this void, and the mirror is reflective of that. So the tradition of mirrors and making it a portal goes back quite far, and that's one of the reasons why, and this is why they say you should cover mirrors when you have a death, so they don't come through.
It has sort of progressed from the spirit coming up to the reflection and then crossing over into our realm, because it is sort of a thin veil. But you know, if you look into the mirror and you see essentially the same room that you're in, but it almost looks like a window to another mirror universe. And I think that's sort of where they got that idea from. Can spirit come through that? I don't personally believe so. But having said that, I have experimented with mirrors and got some really good, interesting results from it. But was that because of the mirrors? I don't know. So yeah, you can see sort of like the progression of ideas coming from that. Although in the program, I don't think she covered up the mirrors for that particular reason. I think she just covered up the mirrors because she was scared of what she was seeing. But it is literally in her mind's eye that's what she was seeing, because I'd still do believe that it was the last image she saw of her ex-partner getting flattened by a bus.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the reflection in the eye, and that's what she's seeing bouncing back.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there, Paul. Her sort of effort on covering up the mirrors is nothing. It's to stop her from seeing it, which I suppose you could look into it is symbolic of her not coming to terms with it. She's covering up the mirrors. She's trying to hide it. She's trying to ignore it. And we all know, you speak to any psychologist and stuff, I mean, this is where problems start. She's not addressing the actual issue or giving herself time to come to terms with it. I think because of the nature of the accident, the suddenness, I mean, and if that had happened to any of us, I mean, the shock that must sort of cause. I mean, and no wonder, everything seemed to have happened so quickly after that, and she didn't have time to process that and the whole situation that she was in. It was literally done, bang, funeral, and I think quite shortly after the funeral, she left to come to the UK, didn't she?
Running away. Yeah,
sort of just trying to get as far away from it as possible. But as we all sort of know and are advised, this is not always the best thing to do.
No, it isn't. But it's a concept that comes up in the in it, doesn't it? Now, another superstition is that when you break a mirror, you'll receive 7 years of bad luck. Now, this actually comes from back to the Romans times, because they believed that the body regenerates every 7 years. And because of, if it breaks into 7, you're not just breaking the physical appearance, but you're also damaging part of your soul.
Yeah, which sort of leads to the fact that you're more susceptible to bad luck, doesn't it? If your soul's not sort of complete, you've damaged yourself. You've damaged your reflection, hence your soul, which will make you, and which will put you into a 7-year regeneration period for your soul to get renewed. But there's quite an interesting medical fact behind this, because when we were looking into this, Kerry, weren't we? We actually found out that medically, a lot of the body does take about 7 to 10 years to regenerate totally, doesn't it? Cells the lot. So, we do renew ourselves sort of scientifically. So that is quite an interesting sort of link that that there is sort of like a spiritual sort of like connection with 7 years, and a sort of quite a scientific connection as well.
I mean, I did actually know about that before. There was a TV program I'd like to watch, and it's like a game show quiz thing. And one of the questions was, how old are you? And the answer was 7.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, it takes, to regenerate, it basically takes about 7 years.
Yeah, 7-year cycle.
So you are only actually 7 years old.
At any given time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's quite prevalent. When I don't know if people are aware out there, but I have a skin condition called psoriasis, and when I would go to the doctors and that about it in the early days, they would always talk about the 7-year generation. It'll go in a 7-year cycle. So if you're having like a bad flare-up, expect it to be quite at that level for about 7 years, and then you'll change and it'll go through a different cycle in another 7 years. It was really weird when they were talking about it. And so far, it's kind of stayed true to form, as it were.
Oh, right.
And we all regenerate. We're all Time Lords.
Oh, there you go. Doctor
Who. Bringing the Doctor Who link in already. Oh, my God.
I'll get that done straight away. Yeah.
Why not? Now, there are some positives, though, with mirrors. If you get married, then you should stand in front of the mirror together And it's supposed to be that, you're uniting your souls by looking in a mirror on your wedding day. Isn't that cute, everybody?
That's cute, yeah. I mean, I think it was 7 years bad luck for me, but there you go. Move on.
I didn't know about that one until I looked into it, to be fair. I was like, oh, I didn't know that one. Maybe that's where I went wrong with my marriage, eh, guys? We didn't do the wedding, the mirror thing when we got married.
Well, yeah, it says here, because you're actually supposed to do it literally straight after you sort of say your wedding vows, don't you? Your I do's. And, sort of, I can imagine the priest getting the mirror out, can't he? Go, right, you two.
Now, stand in front of the mirror, reaffirm them.
Well, to save time, then just have instead of having the table where the where the registrar or the vicar or what could sit on, just have a mirror. Yeah. Kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I think that's a trick that the churches and places are missing out on, to be fair.
Yeah.
They should have a mirror whilst you're doing your vows, just to be sure. So you can look in the mirror and go, see, that's you. You're saying that. Now, we've already said that the connection between Danny and her fiancé only gets broken when she burns the glasses on the fire night, where we learned out when we did the gunpowder plot, and we talked about the bonfire, didn't we?
Oh, yes, it's derives from bone fire, doesn't it? Mm-hmm.
But there's also sexual themes that run through Bly Manor, believe it or not, and one of those is her acceptance of her preference, should we say.
Sexuality.
Her sexuality preference, and its acceptance of the fact that he's passed and she can't change that, and the acceptance of her own sexuality at that moment, because that was the night she also kissed Jamie, the gardener, right?
Yeah. And that's quite telling she does that after, and she makes the move to do that, doesn't she?
She certainly does. She's the one who does that. Now, do we think then, there's a couple of objects that come up in Bly Manor, where it's like the glasses being one of them. Do we think there is an attachment from the spirit of the ex-fiancé to the glasses? Or do we think this is purely symbolic?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll let Richard answer it first.
Because it's only once she's burnt them that we then don't see him anymore.
Well,
or is it completely symbolic where Danny's burnt them and she's let that go?
I think it's the latter. She's let it go. It's for her benefit, not the other way round. I don't, sort of thinking back on it now, I don't think she is wrapped with guilt, and that is, and that is the symbolic sort of letting go for her. I don't think he was connected to the glasses as such, even though, it is quite a popular theme in the paranormal now for objects to hold energies and stuff like that. But I think in that context, no, it was purely for her benefit.
But there is another context in the in the series. Sorry, I went through all the options there, didn't I? In the series, with Viola. Now, Viola is the 17th century ghost that dies basically and feels like she's been shut out and shut away from her family, and her sister usurps her. So she gets an attachment to materialistic objects like her beautiful dresses and her jewellery, and she wants it all packed away in a chest, doesn't she?
Yeah, she sort of like bequeaths it, doesn't he? That's her inheritance for
her daughter.
Yeah.
And then when she dies, basically, she's attached her soul, her spirit, to the trunk, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So are we in agreement then that Viola is an attachment to the objects inside the chest?
Yes, those are the things she valued the most. Those were, I think she probably looked at those as a continuation of her after death, because she knew her death was coming. Yeah.
And she wasn't going to accept that very easily.
No.
So she's attached. We agree there's the spiritual attachment to the objects in the chest, which is actually demonstrated when her sister goes and opens the chest, and then Viola comes out and kills her, basically, right?
Yeah. Jumped out of my skin when that happened.
Yeah, so did I. I'm not going to lie, it's quite jumpy. Bly Manor is quite jumpy at times, I will say that. And then what they do is they throw the chest into the lake, which makes her the lady in the lake.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's sorts of All sorts of things.
All sorts of concepts on this. So let's have a look. First of all, is the concept of, can an object be haunted? Loads of museums around at the moment. They're on the rise. There's generally it's dolls. Annabelle, Robert the Doll, blah blah blah. Hundreds of them. Paintings, jewellery, tribal artefacts. We're seeing it all coming out now regarding spiritual attachment to an object. What do we think on this?
I'll let Paul go on to that, because me and Paul were actually at one of these said museums the other week, weren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't personally believe that some of these dolls are actually haunted. I think it just feeds the hype, if that makes sense. I don't believe in that. But that said, we have had some interesting results, and it's almost like it's not the object that's haunted. It just holds. It's almost like it has a connection to someone, if that again makes sense. It's like if I've got a favourite object, then I'm going to be near it as a spirit, not actually residing within it, if that. Understand that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So it's the object that pulls the spirit forward, not being attached to the object specifically.
Yeah, it's like, someone picks up my favourite cup, I'm going to go over and go, put that down, that's mine.
My cup.
Yeah, and then it's that sort of connection with it.
I can see why people will arrive at that conclusion, but my sort of feeling with objects is you can see them and they can tell you a lot by looking at them, and whether you're sort of producing a lot of the sort of like phenomena that actually occurs around an object. I mean, you see a cup, you can sort of look at the cup, and if it's an old cup, you can tell it's old, so you can sort of, your mind, and that will start your mind sort of turning. And I think you could sort of like place a lot of faith on that, just through the workings of your own sort of subconscious, and if you believe along the lines that we do cause a lot of this phenomena, that it's not so much external, it is an internal process. The objects to me would make sense. I mean, especially where we were a couple of weeks ago, they do have but it has got a lot of very suggestive objects, like old doctor's bags, mirrors again, from, big mirrors, fancy mirrors, you can sort of like look at one of the mirrors and think, oh, that looks like it was in a manor house. And then it gets your imagination going, and you sort of think of manor houses, and you sort of will think sort of 18th century. And I think the individual can produce a lot from that. Just from the visual prompt.
So you think there's psychological prompts?
Yeah.
Is what you think, Richard?
I think, with an object, maybe it's a case of the spirit energy has a connection to that object. And when you go into work with the object, your mind energy or your psychic energy or whatever you want to call it, is making a connection to that object because you're working with it, and the two connections meet, and that's why you can pick up a spirit through an object.
Well, there has been some research done in regards to objects maintaining an energy signature, having their own, nothing to do with spirit. This is an object that's actually imprinted with a energy signature. Cool. Right. Basically, we're looking at psychometry in this way, where you hold an object and you're able to pick up impressions regarding the object, from that. And experimentation has been done on this. So are we looking at this wrongly? Maybe we're taking it a step too far. Rather than assuming that there is the link directly to a spirit, maybe we're actually just picking up the information from the object itself, and actually no spirit is interacting on that at all. It's just purely the energy that we're picking up from the object. You've got to look at the work by Joseph Buchanan on this.
So it's almost like, and everyone knows the stone tape theory, so it's almost like that, you mean?
No.
So whatever energy's been around it has imprinted on the, say, example for a mug, right? It's the energy around it through the years or whatever has imprinted on this mug, and then when I come in to work with it, I'm picking up the energy signatures from that mug.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
If you look at the work done by Joseph Buchanan, he started off looking at things like the touch of metal. So you would wrap up metal and stuff and see if people could pick up what was in the parcel through that, whether there was an energy signature, and they had very high hit rates on that. He then went on to look at things like handwriting. Can you pick up the personality of somebody who's written the letter? So you won't read the letter, you're literally just holding the envelope with the letter inside it, and you have to give an idea of what the personality of the person who wrote it. So you're not handwriting analysis on that, you're picking up impressions from the letter, and then
I can understand
you know who wrote the letter, obviously, so then you can then see if that's right or not.
I can understand that because it is almost, to me, an extension of crystals.
Exactly.
Because you've in the amount of times you've told me, like, hold this crystal, what are you getting vibration wise off of it? And 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. Because I'm devoid of that skill. But obviously, if you was to do it, you know what you're feeling for. You get the impressions off of that crystal. So it is exactly the same as what you're saying, but just with objects instead. Yeah, I can see that. So it's an extension of that then, isn't it, really?
It is, but as I say, experimentation, a lot of experimentation has been done on this. So, guys, if you want to know a bit more about that particular experimentation, you need to go and have a look for Joseph Buchanan and William Denton, because the results from those two studies are actually quite fascinating, and kind of lend evidence to the fact that, yes, objects do hold energy, not spiritual attachment energy, but an energy signature for the life and times that they've gone through as an object.
Yeah, that seems to possibly make more sense. And it's just what we overlay on top of that, sort of people believe that they are, and they will overlay what they think, which is predominantly that they are spirits.
And if that's the case, we're picking up on the energy of the object and not spiritual, then does that mean we are then externalising that process of energy exchange between object and person into what we would expect, which would be a spirit?
Yeah.
It's a belief system.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting one, though. Interesting concept.
Splendid.
Yeah, no, I do like
Perfect.
that. Yeah.
Paul, sorry?
Perfectly splendid.
It's perfectly splendid. However, going back to Bly, there is a definite suggestion that Viola is attached to her objects, hence why she becomes the lady in the lake and becomes a manifestation of a spirit, walking and, doing whatever she does, right?
Yeah. Was it wake up, walk, sleep, isn't it, or something? And that sort of repetitive cycle, which I thought was, I keep referring back to that, and that is the classic sort of like, I often sort of wonder whether that is the classic sort of like ghostly sort of replaying, isn't it?
But now there's a suggestion there, though. She's not just a replay, she interacts, she can kill. But we'll come on to that. We'll come on to that concept in a bit, because the next kind of characters we meet are the children, Flora and Miles. Now, this is a whole big one, right?
Oh, yeah, they're central to the story, aren't they?
Very, very central. You've got, obviously, the male and the female in the children. Now, Flora has something called poppets, her little dolls that she makes, which represent not just the physical people, but also the spirits that are around in the house as well. Little side note, allegedly, there are 134 ghosts in Bly.
Really?
Yeah. You see them.
right.
If you look, when you're watching it, they're all represented. But because you're so focused on the storyline, you're not looking in the background so much.
Yeah, I did actually catch a glimpse of, sort of something I saw early on. The Plague Doctor. I caught a slight glimpse of him. He was sort of off to one side in one of the scenes, nothing, too obvious. But I did remember at the time thinking, oh, that's a Plague Doctor.
But there are 134. That's a heck of a lot of ghosts in one house, right? But anyway, going on to the children. Now, she has these little dolls, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Now, in the UK, we call them poppets. Some people would refer to them as voodoo dolls, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, but voodoo dolls aren't really a thing. It's just something the Western side has sort of put on it. So, but we used to, and it's quite a long folklore tradition of poppets, and they're used in something called sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic. Oh, my teeth aren't in properly again tonight. Basically, it's it's putting a belief system or an intention into a representation of a person. For good or for ill, they used to be used in folklore. So you would, a bit like you want someone to get better, you would you'd make a doll and heal the part that's not right or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Or, very, very prevalent in love magic, that sort of thing. But Flora uses them quite specifically in her dollhouse to show where each of the spirits and physical people, because she makes them a physical people as much as she does the spirits, which is why when she's of a night, she does her dolls and she's putting them wherever they are.
Yeah.
Which is why the one of the lady in the lake is under the wardrobe, under the chest of drawers, because she's outside.
Absolutely, and I don't think. I mean, I just when you say about this Doll's House, pictures of like when you get the old World War II films and that, and they've got those big maps with all the little aeroplanes and little soldiers on it, and they're pushing them forward and things like that. Yeah, that's sort of what it conjures up to me, because that is exactly how she's using that Doll's House. Mm-hmm. All the little figures of the spirits she's placing, as you said, where they are in the house, but also they do move without Flora doing it, and that's because one of the spirits Flora befriended, and basically of a night he would move them to where the spirits are.
Yeah.
So they're basically both playing at this game where they're mapping out where these spirits are at any given time, so they can help Danny, the new au pair, avoid them.
Yes.
Because they don't want her finding out that there are spirits there, and that's down to the character Peter Quint, because he told them not to reveal their presence.
But she's keeping them away. Flora, this is keeping any physical person away from where the spirits are, isn't she?
Yeah, she's trying her
away
best.
From the lady in the lake when she does her walking thing. She tries to save Peter Quint from that.
Yeah.
And fails, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
So we go into the concept then of... Right, so that's how she deals with that. So there's two things here. Flora and Miles can both see the spirits, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, only because they want to be seen by them.
But Flora can see them all.
Yeah, I think...
Because the spirits sort of have this connection to her, I think.
So she's a latent medium, or she's a medium. She can see.
Well,
spirit.
yeah.
Pretty much,
I think of all the people, she is sort of... she's the one that it's all focused around, or she can sort of direct or has some sort of idea of what's going on.
What about Miles?
But then she knows about this. They both know about the spirits because the little boy...
Right, the one with no face.
Playing the games with the Doll's House, so they're aware the spirits are there. So maybe that gives her the foresight to see these spirits.
But then we do say, though, in general, that children are more open to seeing spirit than adults anyway.
Well, yeah, that's obviously another possibility. Definitely.
See, I don't think Miles is as psychic as Flora. I think Flora's the psychic amongst the two of them. I think Miles only sees the spirits because they want him to. Whereas I think Flora sees them anyway.
The spirit of Peter Quint, he actually, when he first announced that he was a spirit to, I believe it was the au pair before Danny, it was because he wanted her to realise what was going on.
Yeah.
And he had come up with a plan so they could be together forever. And she thought he'd gone away, and actually he's like, no, I just didn't want you to see me until I was sort of ready.
Well, he had to find out, didn't he, what he could and couldn't do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like he had to wait until he knew how to use his spiritual body or whatever. And then when he was ready, he could say, right, okay, well, look, I'm here. I haven't gone anywhere. I've always been here, but... And then he sort of puts his hand through hers. And, you know, at that point she realises it is a spirit. And then they come up with this master plan genius to be together forever.
The thing with the Peter Quint ghost, though, is when we first come across him, he's always outside. And his poppet is found on the parapet. Do we think, then, there is some link between him and the poppet? Because it was only after it got brought into the house, he then started coming in the house. The only exception to that was when he was actually possessing Miles.
Yes, I think that's quite key, you know, because, well, particularly for the au pair, because she is the one that actually sort of does sort of see him, doesn't she?
But that was way before the Danny times. That was going back to when she was still there. So the link then for him was with her.
Yeah,
once she passed.
And then it was sort of like he would appear to Danny, but only outside the sort of house. You know, you see him walking past the window usually, and things like that. And there is an instance when she does actually see him on the parapet.
And then she goes and looks on the parapet, and she finds the poppet, doesn't she? And brings the
whether
poppet
that's
in.
Peter Quinn, you know, whether I think, well, we have to assume it was Flora that put the poppet there to get him out of the house. And she actually picks up the poppet and brings it into the house. And then after that, that's when Peter Quinn is more of a presence in the house and becomes quite aggressive.
Yeah.
But we see him attached to Miles before that, don't we? Outside.
Yeah, that's right. He's sort of, you know, I think, the classic, he gives Miles his lighter, doesn't he? And... you know, Miles sort of tries a bit of smoking and stuff like that. You know, he certainly does. It's as if he realises that Miles is a conduit for his mischief. You know, because Miles does have sort of outbursts of inappropriate behaviour, doesn't he, around the dinner table and stuff like that. He will suddenly sort of say, "Oh, and why don't you lot just shut up?" You know, and stuff like that. Or swear or stuff.
So there is a suggestion then that, yes, we've got Peter Quinn, the main character at this point in the series. He's taking over, attaching to Miles so he can enter the house. But there is that attachment or connection, should I say, between Flora the Poppets and the spirits and where she places them. So how big an influence do we think that is on this inter-trio connection, or do we think that's more symbolic?
I think it could be more symbolic, to be fair. But it's definitely an interesting one. I can't say I've really thought about that bit too much.
It's because before he actually comes in, you know, Dana is actually sort of describing him and stuff, but everyone else in the house and even the other sort of like ghosts, and when, you know, they all believe that he is gone away. They believe he embezzled some money and done a bunk.
Yeah, they don't know he's dead at that point, do they?
Yeah, they don't know he's dead. So whether the children know that or not...
They did. They witnessed that.
Mm-hmm.
That comes out later, doesn't it? Because they see the white lady take him and kill him.
Oh, yeah. They drag him down the stairs, didn't she? Yeah.
So they know that.
Mm.
Well, it's an interesting concept, though, isn't it? That three-way connection between the puppets, Flora, and the spirits. And that's where I think it demonstrates that she has more of an ethereal connection between realms than maybe Miles does.
Yeah, and the use of the puppets, that sort of, and as you said, it sort of comes from like sympathetic sort of magic. It's quite understandable, isn't it? I mean, I think anyone can get their head around the idea you make a facsimile of someone either to cause harm or to heal. You sort of do your work on it. I mean, that is quite sort of basic stuff, isn't it? I think you can come to that conclusion, and that sort of thing does actually sort of work.
Mm.
It's a common folklore mythology thing, isn't it? That we do kind of accept because of the folklore we have in the UK and, voodoo folklore that people have put onto it and stuff like that. So I do think that's integral into it. And I do think it's important to recognise the little boy with no face that plays with them as well. Because Flora sees him, she plays with him. The mum says, well, maybe he needs a friend. And then Flora stops being scared of seeing him. Whereas we don't see any reference of Miles seeing any spirit external apart from the white lady when they watch Peter Quint being killed by him. But he doesn't seem to recognise any of the others, if that makes sense. There's no threat from the others.
No.
Even the sister in the attic, we see, she's tied to the attic. She's thrashing around in the attic, isn't she, on the floor. They don't seem bothered by her.
No, I think just because that's where she resides. She's pretty much a fixture up there, isn't she?
Yeah, lucky for her.
There's like an acceptance, isn't there, of the others, even down to like the doctor and there's a soldier in there. I mean, there's loads and loads of different ones. Like I say, you can see that there's acceptance that there are spirits in the house and they're not bothering them. The only people that they're bothered about is the white lady because she can cause harm, the little boy because Flora plays with him, and then Peter Quinn and Mrs. Jessup. So they're your main spiritual characters that are interacting with the children.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, especially the children's connection with the ex-au pair and Peter Quinn. I mean, they would have had quite a bit of interaction with them in life, so there's probably more of a connection between them.
So, let's talk about that concept then. Let's talk about spiritual connection in regards to family members. Now, when you go for a mediumistic reading, that's what you're hoping for, right? You're hoping a family member to come forward and give you validation information that they exist, that they are still ongoing, even though it's in a different realm, and that they're at peace for themselves, and giving validating information regarding that, right?
It'd be nice.
It would be very nice, and very rarely I've had quite a few.
Right. Do tell.
And there were some that are better than others. I've always said this though. Why isn't the validating information that I would know without question?
That's always, I think that is one of the sort of things always levelled, isn't it, at sort of psychics and people that sort of do these readings. A
lot of information comes out, and 9 times out of 10 I'll go to my mum and say, Mum, I've had this reading, this is the information. My mum go, oh, yeah. I know, Uncle Bob had the parrot, and yes, you did have an Auntie Margaret, but you don't know if you would have ever met her. And yes, you did have this, and yes, you did have that. But for me, having that reading, that's no good for me. I need that validation there and then.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
The amount of times I've gone to medium nights and things like that, and I've had a reading, and because there's only my nan and my granddad that I actually remember as like growing up. everyone else died before I was like 3 or 4. So if they came across and they gave me a message, I'm like, well, I don't know, you don't even know who you are. I've got no information about what or who they were before. So the only two that could come across would be my nan and granddad, because they died. I think my nan died just before the London bombings on 7/7, and my granddad died, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago. Maybe a touch more. So if it isn't them two, then I wouldn't know.
See, I have the same problem. I do have the same problem.
Yeah, I've never really been involved in anything like that. Only tentatively at the sort of. I've never sort of. I think the only person ever to give me a reading was you, Kerry, of the tarot cards. That's about the closest I've ever come to it. But
that's more personal. That's not me trying to bring through a relative.
No, that's right, and
that's connected.
Unlike the pair of you, I mean, I've never really had much experience in that area.
But having said that, we have witnessed occasions where information has come through for a specific person, and there is no question as who that is. We both witnessed that, haven't we, Paul? Because we both sat there and sort of were like, oh my God. And we've done investigations where information comes through on various pieces of tech, which has come through with some information that on further research, we've then been able to verify a person with that name in that time period, lived or worked in that particular location.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult one to call. You can't be completely sceptical. You can be in certain ways, but then you have to maintain that with, however, this has happened too, and we can't discount where we don't know where that information. Again, we go back to we don't know where that information is coming through. Whether it is a spirit that's come through and given that information, or whether it's come through from another source. That we're then put it again. We go back to the same sort of concept as to haunted objects, where the information has come through. There's no denying that, but where that information has come from, we put it onto a spirit. It may not be. It could come from another source.
Yeah.
And I suppose you have to really break it down and sort of just look at it quite coldly when you do have a reading. The only two people there are the person that's giving the reading and the person that's been read. And, if you want to look at it really coldly, I mean, the information must be coming from the person that's been read somehow.
Yeah, and just because, my connection to my family, I might not know that information, but my connection, say, to my mum's information could be there with me. I just because I don't know. It's one of those, isn't it? It's incredibly difficult to pin it down. And what kind of experimentation could you do to actually verify where that information has come from?
It's a difficult
It's
one,
a very difficult one, isn't it?
But
at least with an object, you can do various experimentations in regards to that to sort of see whether or not it's possible that you can pick information up from an object, because you can do it in various ways and make sure that you don't know what's in the telepathic interaction and all that is taken out of it. So you can work it with an object easier than you can with information that's coming through. It's a very different ball game.
So, I done an investigation a little while back, and we actually started on a Ouija board, and we got this spirit through. We obviously found out its name, who he was, what he used to do, stuff like that. And because we was in one of these haunted antique research museum places, we said, like, are you connected? Do you have a connection to any of the objects here? And it said yes. So we asked what object it was, and it was a pocket watch, it said. And we said, like, is there any inscriptions on the back? And it said yes. So it's like, okay, what's the inscription on the back? And it actually spelled out his initials. So we actually had a look. It took us about 20 minutes to find this pocket watch, because obviously we didn't know where it was. But yeah, fair enough, we found it. And it was actually in one of the cabinets to sell. So we spoke to the centre manager and said, look, we've done this Ouija board session. We picked up this spirit. This is his details that he gave us. We haven't done any research on him, so, we're just taking it as face value. But he said he was connected to this watch. And we actually gave it to him and said, any chance that you could keep this in your centre? So, that's sort of taking it from a different angle, because rather than working with that object in the first place, it was totally by chance that we picked up this spirit, and it was connected to an object we didn't know nothing about. So it's just, getting it from a different angle, which was really interesting.
This is what makes it so murky, though, doesn't it? Because, like you say, you didn't even know the pocket watch was there before you even started doing that session.
Didn't even know the thing existed.
Yeah.
You could get something like that, which you sort of like, and that makes you think, wow, there has to be some sort of independent sort of body coming in and directing you.
It even described the initials on the back, and it was exactly as it said it was.
You do get it like that sometimes, but going back to what I said, whether it's coming from the individual, who's been read. I mean, with sort of family, we sort of pick up traits from our sort of families and stuff like that. And, apparently I walk like my grandfather used to walk, and stuff like that. There's more to it than their sort of looks. You can pick up sort of certain sort of traits are handed down. And, it's not, and to me, it's not that far a push. Can certain sort of memory traits and stuff like that be hereditary as well?
But then how would the medium pick that up?
I don't know. That is the thing. Probably telepathically. I don't know.
I was say, isn't that a subject for another show? Yeah,
that is.
We'll go with that one.
Yeah. That definitely is. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the first half of the show. So join us after the break as we delve into some more spoilers, I'm afraid, of Bly Manor, and some more concepts that the theories raise up for us. So join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, tonight on the show, we are discussing all things the Haunting of Bly Manor. So there are spoilers alert. We'll say it again on this second half of the show. So before the break, we were talking about the children, Flora and Miles. So let's have a little closer look at Miles. Because Miles is a little weirdo, isn't he, really? He's not a particularly likeable character.
You know what? I don't know. I think he played up in the story because he wanted to go home, because he was sent to like a boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
And when his parents died, I mean, obviously it's traumatic for any child, but he just wanted to go back home to be with his sister, which is understandable. And he was, I do believe that he was at that point visited by the spirit of Peter Quint, because in the story he does say that you've got to do something to get home for them to kick you out, basically.
This is the keys, though, isn't it? And one thing I will say about Peter Quint is he was the ultimate in psychological manipulation.
Yes, definitely.
Now, having had that happen, and I'm a very strong-minded, independent individual, as you are, Paul. We both have had that happen to us, and witnessed it happening to other people as well, that are very strong-minded, independent individuals. And I would never, ever have said I was prey to psychological manipulation. So if you had a character that's incredibly adept at that, as shown in the character of Peter Quint, Yeah, those narcissistic traits are demonstrated quite a lot through the history of him and Mrs. Jessup. And he talks about keys, doesn't he, to Miles?
Yes, he does, yeah.
And it's about those keys to get people to do what you want them to do and break down that mental...
Absolutely. I mean, not only was Miles obviously quite young, but he had that major trauma that his parents have died, so he wasn't quite in the right frame of mind. And I think Peter Quint took advantage of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because the majority of the other household, the older people, I mean, they did seem to see Peter Quinn for what he was.
Yeah.
Didn't they? I mean, you know, and but with Miles, you know, he saw an opening there, and even when he was alive, you know, he was sort of manipulating him.
So there's a vulnerability, isn't there, to Miles in regards to Peter Quint. So he's learnt from him, seen him almost like as a father figure, because his father's absent a lot of the time.
And he was a friend of the parents as well, wasn't he?
That's right. So, and in a funny kind of way, he's very admirable as a character. He's handsome, he's, you know, stylish, he's...
Well, I don't know, I wouldn't have gone that far. I didn't fancy him anyway.
But you can understand why a child would be enamoured almost with Peter Quint. In the physical, this is. I'm talking just as before he died. You know, you can understand the lure
I can understand
of
it.
Peter Quint.
He's like a friend of the family, best mate of his dad's. So, he would always have been around.
Yeah, sort of like a
never mind the fact that he was knocking off the missus.
Yeah.
You know, so, as the child sort of grew up with him being around, so he's almost like part of the family.
He's a bit of a rogue as well, with the smoking and the attitude and the, you know, he's got, like, when he gives the flowers, he comes into the playroom, doesn't he? And he comes in with flowers, and Flora assumes that they're for her. But we all know they're not. They're for Mrs. Jessup. And he says, well, you didn't give them to me. Miles turns around and says, well, you didn't give them to Mrs. Jessup. And Peter Quint turns around and says, yes, I did. Yeah. And it's teaching him keys to how to manipulate people to get what you want. So by the time he's gone to boarding school, he's got a vague understanding of... He said, I'm trying to find the key to getting me sent home. Falling out the tree and breaking his arm wasn't the right key. So then he went to the next level, didn't he? And killed the bird. And then that's what got him sent home, sent back to his sister. No one's arguing the intention. We're talking about the psychological manipulation of Miles in regards to his vulnerability in regards to Peter Quint. Now, Peter Quint possesses Miles on a regular basis throughout. We see it in quite a lot of inappropriate behaviour when Miles is possessed. Brilliant acting. I would like to say the kids are brilliant actors in this. And that portrayal of that is actually quite astonishing for a child actor, quite frankly.
Well, yeah. He must have had some sort of understanding of what was expected of him to sort of like do, and makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Now, this is demonstrated through the swearing, the smoking, the lighter, the kissing Danny on the lips at bedtime, that sort of thing. So the boundary between Miles as a child and the possession of Quint is actually blurred. We're never quite sure at this stage whether he's being possessed or not, or whether he's just a weird child. You know what I mean? We're not quite sure on this at this stage whether it is a possession. So this actually brings up a concept, doesn't it, about spirit possession on a person. Can people be possessed by a spirit?
We see it every time on Most Haunted and other
on other famous TV shows. Oh.
Now, I would like to... it is a tough one, because I would like to say that on this particular topic, there's lots of different perspectives on this, lots of different cases that we could go down into this one. But there's also a lot of mental health that you have to look at in regards to this kind of thing, but which are not going to go down into the mental health side of things, in all honesty, because that's a whole topic in itself. And we would need somebody on who knew a bit more about mental health than we have on this one, and leads in, you've got split personalities, psychosis, schizophrenia, different belief systems, believe about spirit possession. There's exorcism. There's whole avenues we could go down in regard to spirit possession. Now, I've been on paranormal investigations where the person has believed they got possessed by a spirit because they allowed the spirit to come too close. We say, come, take my energy, use my force to help manifest yourself. And mediums have believed and gone into what they would class as a spiritual possession.
Yeah, you're talking what trance mediumship.
Trance mediumship is not so much as a possession. They come very close to affect what's being said, what's, the look of somebody, that sort of thing. It's a little bit less intense. It's not a full-blown takeover. But we have all examined cases where a spirit seems to have overtaken the personality and the physical actions, I would say, of a dead person.
Yeah, I mean, I've like you, Kerry. I've experienced it on many investigations, and I've got my own theories about it, both good and bad for some of it. But the other week, I do believe it was Halloween. Myself and Richard Clements was out on an investigation. And Richard doesn't really go out on investigations that much, do you, Richard?
No, not usually, no.
And one of my members of the team actually experienced being taken over by spirit. Over to you, Richard. What did you think of that?
Right.
Because I know you witnessed it. So
yeah, I witnessed it. It's the first time I've witnessed anything like that. At first, I didn't really understand what was sort of going on, and particularly with the person that was sort of taken over. I mean, I've was he more perceptive to it? Because he was asked, did he want to sort of like try this experiment? So I take it he is sort of versed in actually doing this, but it did seem to get out of hand relatively quickly. It was from what I can remember, it was relatively short, and he got very distressed and needed a couple of others to actually help him out the room and downstairs to actually calm down. So, and I thought to myself, why put yourself through an experience like that? I mean, was it spirit? I don't know. I'm very much on the fence when it comes to this. This is the first time I've actually seen something like this, as I said, but I would need to be a bit more well-informed or forewarned when something like this is actually going to happen.
It's not something that you can forewarn. It's particularly with that particular team member. He has obviously the gift to do mediumship, and he does use it. But I do feel that sometimes he gets quite emotional with it. Yeah. And I'm not sure that he's more experienced enough to control what's going on. So I think he just lets it in a little bit too much than what he should.
Yeah, he was certainly overwhelmed by the whole experience.
We have started running our own circle, and we've got two very experienced mediums running that circle for us. And they are teaching him, as well as some of the others that want to learn how to use their gifts, to control it and, all work together to build their mediumship up. So I think it was a case of that he was doing his normal mediumship stuff, but he just let it get too close to him. And it's had an effect before similar to that, and he does get very emotional. And at that point is when we as managers and that turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, he's getting too far in depth now. We need to take him out of it. So, but that's when we intervene and take him out. That we're doing exactly the right thing. Yeah. Because we know or we fear that he can't control it.
Well, I mean, and if that is the case, I mean, certainly he would need a bit more sort of more training or whatever you do. But for myself, that's the first sort of time I don't really sort of pay much attention to sort of trance mediumship in my studies or anything as regards like paranormal. Quite simply, yeah. And as you said, Paul, I haven't really sort of been around it much.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what you thought of it, because obviously that was pretty much one of the first times you've experienced that.
Yeah, true.
And as a sort of newcomer into the paranormal, it was interesting to hear what you thought. But yeah, I mean, I've experienced it loads. We know his level and when we should intervene, so we take him out of it. We try and do that with the others as well. But we, as I said, we do intervene, but there's part of me that don't want to, and I want them to carry on, just to get more information out of them.
It is startling. I will say that. I will say when you do witness it, it is startling, and you do question, and I think that's relevant that you do, the level of whether or not that person is. I don't think they're deliberately faking. I'll put that out there. I don't think it's a deliberate fake. Whether or not it's a lack of control or self-control.
Yeah.
In regards to that situation. So then we go to the importance of control. Is importance of knowing yourself and knowing your limits and being able to put up those boundaries and stop that situation from escalating into a non-controlled situation.
Well, that's it. I mean, he's self-taught, and he's been doing this for years. It's only just recently that he's joined the team within the last couple of years or so. And that was probably the third time that I've seen him go into that, and he get that emotional. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I know he was self-taught, but has he been taught the right way? I personally don't think he has. But the point of putting our circle together is so that our two experienced mediums can help each other and the rest of the team in helping to control that particular mediumship. So he's learning with us, we're learning with him. We're all learning together. And at the end of the day, we're not saying he's doing anything wrong.
No, but it's not healthy for him, is it? In the same way as when we used to witness Derek Cora going into it on Most Haunted, it clearly isn't good for the physical person when a spirit overtakes. No matter whether you think he was faking or not, in the later days when he first started, it's very startling to watch a medium go through that, and you can see the physical effects it has on the person, and that's not healthy, right? Wherever that's coming from, it's still not a healthy way of working in that kind of way. So you have to get trained in a specific way to control that. And that's where mediumship
that's exactly what we're doing. We're helping everybody learn pretty much the same way like we all do. And, that we had our first session the other night, and that really, really helped. That really helped some of them. And they've been asking questions ever since,
Because you don't want to...
forward to the next session.
You don't want possession. Trance mediumship isn't about possession. It's about allowing the spirit to come close and become strong without the medium losing control.
Channeling more than actual...
Now, this can take form, trance mediumship can take form in many different ways, from automatic writing. You're allowing the spirit to come forward and take use of your hands. Artist, a psychic artist. I've seen somebody who, in normal, everyday life, can't draw a poxy thing, quite frankly, but then she gets herself into that altered state of consciousness and produces phenomenal portraits of people's spirit that she says she's getting. We've seen that again. We saw that on Most Haunted, a psychic artist working. And it's allowing spirit to come very close to you, but you're never losing control. And unfortunately, if you're not trained and you don't know, they can come too close, where it does seem to overtake that person. But in certain lights, you can see changes in people's faces. They can talk in a way they wouldn't normally talk, you know, and it's a very interesting thing to watch when you've got a trained trance medium.
Yeah, I mean, that is something I would like to experience, you know, sort of like, I would have loved to have been around sort of during the heyday, you know, was it Dorothy Stokes and stuff like that? I mean, that would have been interesting, I think, you know, and it's... but again, the incident Paul's talking about, not a lot of information really came forward. I mean, he
got emotional, didn't he? And then
he was overtaken too quickly by whatever, you know. And again, it was sort of like, if the information, you know, you could have sort of made up yourself. You know, he was sitting in they were sitting inside an Anderson shelter. Which, for people that don't know, is like a reconstruction of a World War II air raid shelter, and there was sort of, you know, again, that's a prompt, isn't it?
So then, is it down to he got emotional? He's an emotional person. He got emotional. Go back to Miles. Miles seems very in control as a child of his emotions. He doesn't seem to outwardly show his emotions. So when they portrayed the possession as tucking away the person into a memory.
Yeah.
So Flora and Miles, when they got possessed, they got tucked away into like a little memory, didn't they? And
yeah.
She always went.
Yeah, and
Flora
I think
knew it was a memory because she was always the wrong age. She said, "I know this is a memory." So she was at that point. She was possessed, and Miles was the same.
I think that's how. Peter tended to manipulate Miles by saying, you know, I'll sort of take over your body and I will tuck you away and you will be with your parents. Because obviously that part of the timeline was their parents had just died. What child would want to be with their parents?
Which is classic manipulation. He's using the carrot and the stick approach, you know. Let me use you and you can go and see your parents for a bit or whatever.
With permission. They had to give that permission.
Yeah, but what kid, after just losing their parents, what kid would turn that down?
It's again a manipulation technique, isn't it?
Yeah.
You, me, us. That's what that was all about. But when I was being taught, I was always taught to put yourself in a chair in a different room.
Right.
To get yourself into that mental state. So you take your own ego and ego out of it, and you put that to one side, and then that opens the channel for spirit to communicate. So you're taking yourself out of it. And this is when I talk about grounding. I talk about it's about actually getting yourself into a neutral state. You're not positive, you're not negative, you're neutral. So you're taking yourself actually out of the equation completely and going into whatever kind of work you're doing in a neutral state. So you don't influence what's happening. Your day-to-day stresses and worries or elations don't affect what you're doing because you have to put yourself to one side when you're doing that kind of work and be completely focused on the intention that you're either trying to manifest or the situation you're trying to create, if you're doing a ritual, or if you're trying to connect to your spirit world.
Yeah.
You know, and meditation is a training tool for that.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, the preparation is just as important.
It is, and we see that preparation work that all those four characters, Mrs. Jessup, Peter Quinn, Miles and Flora, are going through. So the two spirits are priming the children into how to put themselves basically to one side so they can be possessed. But there is that suggestion then, isn't there, you have to allow a spirit. They can't just do it. You have to... the person has to allow it.
Yeah,
and that is a common...
invite them in...
Yeah, and that's a common theme in sort of the paranormal sort of realm in literature and stuff like that. Vampires coming into your house and stuff. It always takes the sort of like the the receiver to actually allow it to happen.
Like a well-known mythology of a vampire can't cross the threshold unless you allow them in. You open the door, the window.
So you can see where that sort of has come about, yeah.
Yeah, interesting concept. And as I say, it is very startling if you come across it or it happens to a person, regardless of what you think is going on there. If that's what they believe has happened, you can't undermine that, shall we say, by being dismissal of that situation.
I think it's sort of like, this is where you have to sort of have a good empathy base. You have to be able to empathise with the person.
You certainly do. You do, you have to deal... It's how you deal with it, isn't it?
Because it's obviously very real to the individual that experiences it. So, you can't...
Right, so let's look at the concept of, so even the spirits get pulled into memory, don't they? We see it in the attic, there's a knock, 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 and then Peter Quinn gets pulled back into one of his own memories. And even Mrs. Jessup, or Miss Jessup, should I say, gets pulled into her memory, happy memories for her when she's spending time with Peter Quinn before, all of the crap happened. But he gets pulled into a horrible memory of when his mum turns up. And it's, so everybody is getting pulled back into memory. Is that then... Now, here's a concept for you.
Right.
With the children, they're being put into the memory. With the spirits, they get pulled back. Now, is this an erosion of their conscious control? They haven't got complete control over themselves in spirit form, so they keep getting pulled back into the memory. So is that an erosion of their conscious control? Yeah, put that one onto the table.
It's quite interesting that you use the word erosion, because as they keep getting pulled back, their minds also lose the memory. So when they start losing their memory, their face fades. And in the program, Bly Manor, the spirits actually had no faces.
The older
because
spirits,
they didn't have those memories anymore.
So there's that erosion, isn't there, over time?
Yeah. So over time, their memories eroded, so did their faces.
So then when we look at, we equate that to the paranormal field, we go out and we say, do we think then that's why it was demonstrated with no faces on the series? But we come across, we see apparitions and half the time they've got no head or they're very hazy figures and they're not defined or we just see a body part. Is that because their conscious memory of themselves is eroding because of time? Like our memories do. I can't remember much of when I was 5-6 years old.
It's certainly an interesting concept. I mean, I've sort of looked into this, and I tend to sort of find sort of people that sort of see manifestations, they tend not to be sort of that old, sort of back in time, sort of wartime, Victorian time. That generally is about it. But when you sort of talk about, the classic sort of the Elizabethan era type sort of manifestations and stuff, I mean, they are very sort of objective, they're a bit confused, and people usually only tend to equate them to a historical figure they know about, who may have had a connection. They may not be that figure at all, but there does certainly seem to be a haziness the further you go back. It was like when I believed I saw my sort of full-bodied apparition down in Dover Castle, down in the wartime tunnels, and that was of a World War II RAF officer, and that was pretty clear, very strong, a very strong impression. I don't know quite if there was an older figure come through, whether it would have been that defined. I don't think it would have been.
Then that argues against your internal manifestation of an externalisation of an internal force, because at the end of the day, We all kind of know what to expect in regard to Elizabethan figures. Tudor period is very ingrained in our memory. So if we were seeing figures from that period and it's from our minds, then wouldn't that be clear as crystal clear because we would know it? So that kind of disargues that argument, doesn't it?
It seems, and going along that sort of line, it seems, we have, sort of going back on what I said, it seems people have quite a clear definition up to Elizabethan times. Then there seems to be a long gap, and then we come to Romans, which are quite, but everyone has a clear definition of what a Roman looks like.
And of course, we're going to put it onto some character, as it were, that we know from that particular period of time, because that's what we know. So that is going to be the logical assumption. I'm in the place of, say, Anne Boleyn. She's lived here. We know she lived here. We've got verifiable proof that she lived here. I'm seeing an Elizabethan figure, obviously a lady because she's not dirty, and in that way, do you know what I mean? She's quite rich looking. So you put that, of course you do. It could be a lady, and like you say, it could be anybody. It could be, I don't know, somebody else, or a different visiting person or whatever. Or it could be a lady in waiting. But we would, of course we would. That's our natural assumption. That doesn't mean to say it isn't. I'm just saying it's an argument against, isn't it? But is it then an erosion of the memory from the spirit as to how they appear? If their memories are eroding, like ours do, in human physical form, is that why we see a disparagement in regard to how they physically form in an apparition?
Quite possibly, because some of the stuff that is presented as evidence of apparitions, I mean, well, I'm talking about photographs and stuff, I mean, they are quite sort of, blurred, aren't they? And, you can't make a lot out of them.
I would go more on witness statements more than I would a photograph, in all honesty.
Yeah, true, yeah.
I would go on witness statements because people have seen crisis ghosts and apparitions of, in graveyards, and they seem quite a solid form. Half the time people don't even realise in real life that they've seen something until after the event.
Yeah, true.
So, anyway, that's a concept, right? An interesting concept. Now, let's have a look at Viola. She's the lady in the lake. We've said she's the archetypal type of ghost. She's one of the main symbols in the Bly Manor. Now, how many ladies of the lake are there around the UK?
Quite a few.
Hundreds. Pretty much, most bodies of water in the UK have some tale or other about a lady or an apparition of a lake.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Now, this actually goes back to the tales of King Arthur, is actually where this originated from. Lots of different characters through that period of history have been put to the lady in the lake. And basically, she's representation of the realm which is completely unknown to the reader. She's sort of that in-between.
Yeah.
She's not part of this world, but part of this world, so she can cross realms effectively. And she's a symbol of mystery. You never quite know what she is or who she is or what she does or why she's there. And that is where Viola comes from. Although they attribute her to a character, that's the symbolism of the lady in the lake.
Yeah.
She's very violent, is Viola.
She's certainly a woman on a mission, isn't she?
She's definitely on a mission. Which actually brings up another concept, actually. Emotional connection. If a spirit... Let's look at that one. Viola, obviously, is driven by strong negative emotion. Anger. She feels like a lot got took away from her from life. Her wishes weren't, adhered to. She lost her daughter. Her sister betrayed her. Her husband. Everything. So that's why she's quite an angry character.
Yeah.
And then she gets chucked in the lake, of all things. I mean, like, add insult to injury. So her mission is to find her daughter, which is why she wakes, she walks, she goes and does all that, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Because she goes to the bedroom and she finds her daughter, which is why the little kid with no face
yeah.
gets killed, because that's not her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right, and he was sleeping in her bed.
And he was sleeping in her bed, so she was annoyed about that. So that's why that spirit ends up
So
being...
be warned, Goldilocks.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
God. So that's why she does it. She wakes, she walks, and then she goes back to sleep again. Now, violent ghosts... Right, no, emotions. Let's talk about the emotional impact of ghosts. If a spirit has more of an emotional... We talk about spirits haunting places because of their emotional connection. The strength of the connection connects stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how we equate things to battlefields. That's the word I was groping for there.
Yeah.
Battlefield hauntings. It's the emotion of the time that's locked that memory and those spirits in place. And that's... We equate that quite a lot to... When we look at history and stuff like that as to why there possibly could be a haunting in a place, we look for those kind of high trauma moments, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, they always seem to be a go-to, yeah.
And Viola is the epitome of that, isn't she?
Well, yeah, I mean, sort of her sort of long illness and everything, yeah, you can see her decline throughout that episode, can't you? And she does hang on for a long time because you expect her to be dead and buried quite quickly, but she does sort of hang around in the world of the living, sort of building up a resentment, I suppose.
Yeah, and then she gets murdered. I mean, come on, she does get murdered by her sister at the end.
Yeah, true.
Some would say that was a mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it as a mercy because she was suffering
For a long time.
Yeah.
And for her character, that wouldn't sit well.
No, definitely not.
So it becomes a mercy that her sister does that, even though her intentions of her sister are not particularly merciful. She does it for her own selfish means. But for Viola, it was actually an act of mercy to put her out of her misery, quite frankly. But she goes into death with all of this anger and resentment.
Yeah.
And that is what maintains her in the spirit, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And it makes her violent. She doesn't like anybody that's in her place, which is why everybody avoids her. A lot of people come across her, and that's why they become spirits linked to Bly Manor, because she kills them.
Yeah. And her anger, it's almost like her anger keeps them there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because once you are entrapped within Bly, you can never leave, is sort of like the mantra, isn't it?
They explain it like it's her gravity, isn't it?
Mm.
It's her gravity that holds the spirits there. And we see her, in the series, you're seeing her kill the plague doctor guy, who's just trying to, when it was in hospital at one point, trying to help people, comes across her by mistake. You see that with the child in her bed, I mean, an innocent child. She's not discerning with whose life she takes. We see that with Peter Quint. And we see those characters all being held in her, how they explained it, her gravity was there. Right, so there's another concept there. Can ghosts actually cause physical harm? In the paranormal field, we're seeing this come up more and more now as well, is that, I've been scratched.
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually come across it myself, but if you've been on social media and stuff, I mean, it seems to be quite prevalent. What it is, I do not know. I'm still reluctant to put it down to any form of spirit, for want of a better word, but any other reason or stuff I can't seem to come up with.
I mean, I'm not a big lover of the whole scratches on people, because it can be quite easily explained away. But having said that, I have experienced something a bit similar. It wasn't scratches, but we was at a location called the True Crimes Museum, and one of our investigators was actually in, they call it the death chamber, because they've got a bathtub that was used to melt dead bodies in a famous murder case in the UK. They had like a table, an execution table, and other bits and pieces like that. And she felt a very sharp pain on her chest. It was at the top of her chest, so I said to her, okay, do you mind if I have a look? So she pulled down her top a little bit, and where she had the pain, she had 3, it looks like puncture wounds, which were they were in a triangle, like 1 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and they were in like a perfect triangle you could quite easily draw, but it was 3 puncture wounds, and they were almost like blistered up. So I can't explain that.
Was it
but
an insect bite?
In a perfect triangle.
Coincidence? That just happened to be in a triangle?
It could be, but as they come up all the same at the same time, the same rate, I don't know. I mean, that's. I think that could be quite a far-fetched coincidence. But I do have a recollection of when some people were executed, they were they're injected with 3 different types of chemical, and these injection things they used had 3 needles in it. So it was like 3 injections all stuck together. Mm-hmm. So you'd have 1 at the top, 2 at the bottom. And I thought maybe rather than having scratches, if there was a spirit there that had been killed that way, it sort of superimposed that in a physical manifestation on their body.
Possible.
Yeah.
So rather than stepping into our investigator's body, well, that's what they could have done to manifest that wound on them. But I mean, you guys know that I am in the medical field, and I couldn't explain that. It could, I think for perfect pyramid shape on the chest, I think that unless like this insect's got like a ruler with him, I don't think that's going to be very. I can't see that working as an explanation. But I use
it's a possibility. It's no lack of possibility. It's another form of possibility, isn't it? If you're going to accept its spirit manifesting on someone's body, you can't discount that it could have been an insect that got caught under her top and like bits of 3 times.
I'm still not accepting that it's spirit, though. I understand that's one of the possible explanations.
Yeah.
Because although I can't explain it, it's something that I just can't explain. So who's to say, like, in 10 years down the line, someone could actually come up and say, well, actually, that happened to me. This is exactly what it was. Yeah. Or they might have an experiment to prove something else that it could have been something that I've not even thought of.
Yeah.
So, although I just put it down as an unexplained experience.
Yeah.
That's what I do with any paranormal experience I have.
Because there's one area where if you think spirits are going to hurt you and cause physical harm, you would think it would happen more in a poltergeist case than in any other case, wouldn't you? And it's very rare a person gets hurt in a poltergeist case.
Physically, because, they're going to be throwing chairs around and...
and very rarely does it actually hit anybody. I mean, even in the Enfield haunting, there was only one case of somebody actually getting injured with all the things that were thrown around and furniture moving. Nobody actually got injured. There's only one instance where the photographer in the early stages, Graham Morris, his name was, visited the house and they were seeing flying objects going around. They were trying to capture these flying objects going around. He was actually hit on the forehead by a piece of Lego and he got bruised by that. But when you look at poltergeist cases in general, considering there's fires and there's all sorts of things that go on in poltergeist cases, very rarely does anybody get hurt.
What annoys me with poltergeist cases is the spirits always make a mess. Why is it never the other way around?
They don't tidy up after themselves.
No.
But even in the paranormal sort of field, I mean, poltergeist activity, if all of all the activity, that is sort of the one that quite possibly is knocked down to spirit, isn't it? I mean,
I do believe personally that it's more telekinesis.
Yeah,
and I believe that is what it is. I don't believe it's a noisy spirit or anything like that.
Okay, then the argument against that then would be, if it is an external manifestation of an internal process, and it is that strong an emotion or physical change that's causing that, if there was some form of resentment to another person, you would think then that there would be more cases where people get hurt because it would be directed at a person. And it isn't. It's just uncontrollable external manifestations.
But I think it gets fed by fear. And I think, it's hard to explain. I'm just trying to think of putting it into words. Say, for example, like the Enfield poltergeist. Let's go with that one. It happened to two sisters. Now, okay, one of the sisters, or both the sisters, were coming into the age of puberty, so a lot of changes were going on, both mentally and physically. So, would one of those sisters, whoever was creating the activity, telepathically or telekinesis,
telekinetically,
yeah, that's the one. Would they really want to be hurting their sister?
But then you bring other people into that. Like, they had loads of people come into that house. It wasn't just the main players that we all talk about, like Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair. They had a lot of people from the SPR come in who were actually being very disparaging about it and thought the girls were faking it. There's an opportunity. You think I'm faking it? Have that. They didn't.
Yeah, have that.
But then maybe they just wasn't the type of people, the girls, in fact, they weren't the type of people to hurt anyone.
Well, that's a completely different topic. We could go into the Enfield haunting a lot if we wanted to. We could go into that quite deeply. But more prevalent, the modern day, is slap marks or scratches that seem to occur in the paranormal field. They come out with, I've been scratched, I've got a burning mark, and then when they look on a back, there's, scratches. It's put down to a lot of spiritual mumbo-jumbo, quite frankly. The mark of the Trinity and all sorts of things I've heard about this one. But there are there are so many logical explanations that it could be before jumping to the assumption that ghosts can actually harm. Correct?
Totally.
Yeah. And there's one interesting thing in sort of like the scratches and the bite marks and stuff. It only ever seems to happen to paranormal investigators.
Not necessarily. I've seen it occur overnight for people as well. I've woken up, I've got this mark on me. I find those less relevant because you can do so much things. I thrash around all sorts at night, quite frankly, and you can't necessarily discount that you've done that in your sleep. It's a difficult one because I've seen it on an investigation. I've seen somebody have marks on their body from while we were investigating, and the guy was holding a camera when it happened.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen it. And he didn't have any, across-the-body kit on him. He was literally just stood there holding a camera and with his hands. And these marks appeared on his body. And we, like Paul says, logically, you're thinking, how the hell did that happen? Because we all stood here watching. It was actually, the light was on even when that happened. We were doing an experiment. The light was actually on. He had a camera in his hand recording the experiment and these marks appeared on his body. It's a fascinating way of, again, different ones. But considering the amount of people that say #I'm a demon, it all seems a spiritual and a mental and an emotional thing rather than a physical thing is what I would say on that one. Now, we are running out of time, so I want to move on quickly.
Right.
The last character I want to discuss with you two guys, the concepts that come up with this one, is Mrs. Grosse. Now, we know she dies. She falls down a well.
Yeah.
She knows, she sees it, she doesn't accept it, and everybody, she's carrying on as normal, even though she is not alive, she's dead, she's a spirit from the beginning. Massive spoiler alert, everybody. But she is fully formed, solid, performing her tasks throughout the whole time. Her body's decaying in a well, but she's carrying on perfectly normally, apart from she's given to episodes of being vague, shall we say.
Yeah, being vague, and she doesn't eat, does she? She always makes excuses for that. But apart from that, yeah, you know something's up, but you're not quite too sure what.
Yeah, I mean, when she was first met, Danny first met, didn't she? Mm-hmm. It was shortly before that she was actually thrown down the well. Mm-hmm. And she didn't get to the stage where she accepted her death.
Yeah.
So it was practically her spirit looking down the well when Danny turned up. And because everyone that was there see her, I think it just sort of held the belief that she wasn't actually dead and she could carry on as normal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she was the housekeeper, and she literally just died, as you said, when Danny turned up. She's looking down the well. She walks over, she looks over, and, she goes into her role, her housekeeping role, and just carries on. She is, I think, perhaps that is a strong point, her gazing down the well. It's only briefly, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then she's distracted and carries on as is.
And if you notice throughout her story, every now and again she would notice a crack in the wall.
Yes.
Yeah, and that crack is the crack that was at the bottom of the well. So it's almost like that memory is trying to bust through her wall that she's put up.
Mm. It's almost like she knows. She's like she recognises the crack, but can't equate it to anything.
Yeah,
so
because she doesn't believe. Because she doesn't believe she's dead.
Yeah.
She has convinced herself that she's still alive, and everyone around her is still interacting with her like she's alive. So she just puts the fact that she's dead back in the back of her mind and walls it up.
Yes.
And that crack is something that's trying to push through and say, well, actually, this is the last thing you see when you died.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think she is trying to sort of come to terms with it. I mean, because she's often in the church, the chapel on the grounds, isn't she? She's often sort of in there contemplating and lighting candles and stuff like that. So she's obviously trying to sort of make head nor tail out of it.
Yeah.
She also has, and I don't know if you guys picked this up, but when she's lighting her candles, and the first time you see her, she lights 4 candles. And we put it down to Mrs. Jessup and the mum and the dad.
Mm-hmm.
So who was the 4th candle for? It's almost like she, like you say, subconsciously, although she's a spirit, but it is still a subconscious thing. She's owing it to herself because we're like, well, who's the 4th one? You know what I mean?
And she has that sort of like the responsibility of being the housekeeper and stuff. And she obviously thinks what would they do without her? She's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. It was all she had left after her husband left. She became...
Yes, I mean, she's very much, she's the archetypal type sort of, and she was married, was she? I thought she was like a maiden aunt type, who's just always there.
No, she got married and then her husband ran off with somebody, and that's when the lady of the house, the mum, said to her, why don't you move in here? And that's when she moved in, and that's when she became completely entwined with Bly, because Peter Quint turns and says to her, you've got nothing if it isn't for this house.
Yeah.
And that's when she was, before she died, before any of them died. Yeah, you've got nothing. So she becomes almost becomes the part of the fabric of the house, because she has nothing
even
external.
While she was
alive,
living. She had that responsibility and had that sort of pointed out to her.
And she becomes a very big focus of resentment for Peter Quint, because once he's passed, he can't understand why everybody can see her while she's carrying on her daily duties, while she's effectively not really changed at all, even though he possessed Miles to push her down the well. Miles has got no recollection of killing her, because he didn't. Peter Quint did while he was possessing Miles. So he's very resentful towards her because he says, I need you to accept, takes her to the well and makes her look down. And it's at that point she still kind of doesn't accept it. It's only then she starts getting the memory flashbacks of the interview with the cook. Yeah. And that's part of the process of acceptance. So there we go. Here's a concept, another concept. I love concepts tonight. I'm all over concepts for you guys to mull over and get your brains around. The point of death for all of us is hopefully an easy process. If we die in trauma and we're not expecting it, what point of acceptance then is there? At what point do we accept it? Do we have that void period where we spend time and our soul gets to the point of acceptance so we can move over, and that becomes at the burial moment, like the Kabbalist perspective, going back to the beginning of the show? Or is it we choose to move over?
Well, yeah, I mean, religions have tried to sort of like put this into some sort of context. I mean, particularly in the Catholic faith, with lasers, I mean, after death, you would not go to your final destination. You would go to somewhere called purgatory, where you would sit and literally wait and, sort of for acceptance, to be, to get yourself spiritually sort of intact before you moved on. So,
yeah, you sit there and you wait for. It's almost like you're given a raffle number, and you go, "Cash in number 3, please," and then you go to the pearly gate at number 3, and
So, and again, this unexpected sort of death. Yeah, this is very sort of widely believed within paranormal circles that this can cause a lot of hauntings, and stuff like that. I mean, can it?
Because you haven't accepted, you mean?
Yeah.
So you stay haunting, you stay earthbound.
Yeah.
Very interesting concepts we've brought to the table tonight. I think you'll agree.
Yeah. Certainly got me thinking.
Yeah, I'll go watch Bly Manor again, I think.
I know, it's a fascinating, and actually, the more I was watching it, the more concepts were actually coming to me while I was going through that story. And it is just a story, but it's amazing what a fictional story, what concepts it can bring up in relation to some of the work we do and some of the research we do. And it's a fascinating concept on a lot of different levels. Quickly, the last one I want to talk about is the uncle. Now, he's very tied to his office. We only ever see him in his office. And at this point, you're never sure, is he a ghost? Is he real? What the hell is he? But he's haunted in a completely different way. He's haunted by himself, isn't he? And this is a mental breakdown, I would say. And that is symbolic of his own personal demons haunting him.
Yeah.
Yes, because, it's all to do with he was having an affair with his brother's wife, wasn't it? Was were they
right,
brothers?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and there was the thing that that Flora was not actually, he was not Flora's father. The brother was this brother we're talking about. And he's sort of like, it's the classic scene, he comes in and just cuts him out of everything, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which would cause an emotional and mental trauma for the uncle. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, sorry. And we see the characteristics of what the brother had said to him. They manifest, don't they, of the grinning, smiling, smarmy, horrible characteristics they externalise into another character. But that's him being haunted by his own self. And that's very symbolic. A lot of people do that, don't they? They have that side.
Of everything that's going on within Bly Manor and everything, I mean, we should have got it earlier, because he wasn't even at Bly Manor, was he, for most of the time, when he was going through.
But he was banished, and it was only until Viola was confronted and taken into Danny was he then allowed onto the premises.
Allowed back,
allowed back. It broke that for him too. So Danny taking Viola into her and that possession, effectively, or that that taking her in, broke a lot of things. It released all the ghosts from Bly Manor. It broke that gravity, didn't it? And those bonds that created, to the tragic ends that Danny always knew she would end up back at Bly Manor and became the lady in the lake herself. And in a different way, though, wasn't it? It was a different way. Because
she didn't kill anybody.
No.
For that.
And she didn't accept when Jamie wanted to join with her. She didn't accept it. She refused it.
Yeah.
Wow. What a series. So many concepts that raised up for me, and you guys, I know that for a fact. We talked about it. There was quite a few evenings while all of us were watching it, we would talk about a particular episode, and it would bring up so many different concepts that we deal with, in the paranormal field of folklore and mythology and types of hauntings.
I must admit, that was really quite hard, because both me and Richard had watched it all before Kerry did.
The last episode.
Trying to have a discussion, and it was like, Kerry's not
What episode's she up to?
We could talk about it up to a certain point, and then the next night we'd talk about it a little bit more as I'd watched another episode. Yeah, it's quite frustrating for you boys.
It's very rare I binge watch anything, because I just don't like doing it. I can usually only hack about 2 episodes of something, and I get bored. But no, certainly Bly Manor. Yeah, I'd done it all in a day, I think.
Yeah. And there's so many people on social media that didn't understand it. I can't understand why.
No, well, we hope we've brought a little illumination and even something for you to think about the concepts that raises for you guys. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. So, guys, any news to report?
No, I don't think so.
Have we got any blogs up?
There is a blog up, and it's called The Ghosts of the White House.
Quite topical at the moment, I suppose.
Yeah,
very topical.
That's the one we've got up. I think the next blog that's going to go up next week will probably be a blog about dinosaurs, I believe, Kerry.
Yes. I decided, why do we not see ghosts of dinosaurs? Is the next blog up from me. So you need to go to www.paranormalconcept.com to have a little read of that, or follow us, Paranormal Concept Show, over on all of the socials. You'll find us over there. On that note, it's the end, boys. We've come to the end.
We've come to the end of another show.
I enjoyed that.
I know, it's a really good one. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Can we do the Haunting of Hill House?
That means I'll have to watch that one next.
I haven't seen that one. No.
On that note, say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
At the Halifax, we know that catching up and checking in on each other has never been more important. So when our customers couldn't come into a Halifax branch, we picked up the phone and gave them a call. In fact, this year we've made over 250,000 wellbeing calls to customers for a natter and a catch-up, just to see if they're doing okay. Halifax, it's a people thing.
We are the University of Bedfordshire, where groundbreakers take risks, where future leaders make their mark, where high flyers soar. Get the support and opportunities to achieve more, become more, defy expectations. Find out how a degree at Bedfordshire can change your life. Book now for our open day on November 21st at beds.ac.uk/defy.